Okay. Greetings, learners. Welcome to another video of history. We are still doing the civil rights movement, but we are answering now an essay question, which is the civil rights movement and the South, as I said in our previous video. So the way that we are going to engage our today's lesson is going to be different, because in an essay, what you need to know is that essay always ask one and the same thing, but in different wording, meaning that they always want one and the same thing from you. In this case of the civil rights movement, the question will always want you to discuss the events that happened during the civil society protest in America during the 1950s to 1960s, which are the same events, but the question, therefore, is going to give you guidance or parameters on how to articulate these events. So what we're going to do today, we are going to discuss these events specifically, because this is not like a source-based question, whereby in a source-based you need to understand everything and discuss everything, because they give you scenarios or they give you abstracts which are based on that event. Therefore, you must know everything, word after word, everything as it is. But in an essay, you need to master the key event of that chapter. So here I took two past papers questions from 2018 and 2019. Then I want you to see that although these questions are phrased differently, but they are asking one and the same thing, or they want you to discuss the same points of argument. So in 2018, there is the essay question asked, the sit-ins were the only form of non-violent protest that was used by civil rights activists in the 1960s to bring an end to segregation in the USA. Do you agree with the statement? Support your answer. That means here we are saying, oh, yes, civil rights used sit-in only. Then you discuss your essay in that manner. Or you are saying, no, there are other forms that were used during the civil rights. Then you discuss the other events or the other form of non-violent protest that were used by the civil rights activists. Then the second question now in 2019 says, explain to what extent the various forms of civil society protest in the USA were successful in transforming the lives of African Americans in the 1960s. That means now, if you answered this essay question by saying no, there were other forms of civil society protest, of non-violent civil society protest that were used during the 1960s, and then you engage them, that means the response that you will give in this essay for 2018 is similar to the response that you are going to give here, because in 2019, what we are discussing is these events, but we are saying their success, that was their success to a greater extent or was to a lesser extent. Therefore, without waste any time, let us engage the event. So what we are going to do, we are going to engage the events, because we are responding to an essay chapter here. So you must speak to key events that happened during the 1950s to 1960s in America for civil society. So our first event is the Brown versus the Board of Education, which took place in 1954, which was headed by a political organization called the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, abbreviated as NAACP. So what happened is that America in education applied a system which was called separate but equal, meaning that African American had their own schools and and white American at their own schools. But the government said all schools will be equal. Their educational system, resources, and everything will be equal. So in this case, the Brown family was living in a neighborhood whereby the closest school was a white-only school. Therefore, they filed a court case saying that America is a democratic state. Therefore, it cannot be that their child will travel 1.5 kilometers to a black school while there is a school nearby and don't attend to this school, mainly because it is designated for white people. So you remember that in our first video, when discussing the civil rights movement, we discussed three forms or three approaches that were used during the civil rights movement. We said there was a constitutional obedience whereby African Americans were fighting the oppressive system of America within the parameters of the Constitution, or using the Constitution of America to fight the Constitution. And then number two, we said there was non-violent rebellion whereby African American now we are going against laws that oppress them to fight for their rights. And then number three, we said there was militant rebellion, which was used by the Black Power, which advocated for violence. Then, so here where the Brown family and the NNCP files a court case, this means they were fighting within the system. So in here we can say that ila khona babesasebenzisa approach esithi constitutional obedience, because they were fighting the educational system within the perimeters of American Constitution. So fortunately enough, the NNCP won the court case, but however, because the white American did not like integration and everything, they did not allow this court ruling. Therefore, principals and all people who were working within the Department of Education who were white made sure that black people suffocate in white-only schools or in schools that were designated for white-only children. So therefore, in responding to the essay question of 2019, this means this event was successful to a greater extent, because previously you'll know that there's something that was called the Jim Crow laws, which oppressed the black people. So separate but equal was something that was advocated by the Jim Crow laws. So when the NAACP files a court case and wins it, that means this event was successful to a greater extent. So these are people, therefore, during the court case, demanding that an equal education is the one that brings integration, because black people schools were overcrowded, they were poorly resourced and everything, while the one of whites had everything in order for a child to success. So in this photo here, that shows the first day whereby black school, black learners went to a white-only school. A mob of white people gathered to try to discourage and lambast African American student. So it was a very sad day, of course, for African American. So here we can conclude and say that this event challenged the Jim Monochrome laws. 2, it was fighting for discrimination. And racism. In education. So this was a first step for African American after slavery to challenge the African American or to start the process of civil rights movement. Then therefore the key event therefore took place, or the event that is argued by historians that it is the event that shaped the civil rights movement, or the event that is argued to be the one that brought the civil rights movement. It is the Montgomery bus boycott. So this event therefore took place in 1955 to 1956. So the Montgomery therefore bus boycott now changed everything, because it gave African American a sense of self-realization. It's the event that gave momentum to the civil society protest. It is an event that also shaped the civil society movement, as I said, to a greater extent, because it mobilized great attention of African American to join forces and fight for oppression in the system of America. Therefore, this event was headed by well-known Martin Luther King. An African American lady named Rosa Parks defied a white lady to give up her seat. So what happened is that in America, the Jim Crow laws demanded that whenever Black American bought a bus, in a section in a bus that was designated for African American, if it happened that the bus is full, a black person will have to give up his or her seat to a white person. So in this day, in 1955, Rosa Parks defied a white lady, asking her to give up her seat. Therefore, this led to her being arrested. So this is a picture of Rosa Parks of this movement. So this is a collage. So in this picture, this is Rosa Parks, and the one on your left, so this is Rosa Parks. Let me change color. Let me try yellow. Yes. So this is Rosa Parks here. So this picture here shows Rosa Parks on the day of her trial. So after she was arrested, the following day, black people gathered and then decided to boycott all the buses. As you can see here, this was the following day. So most of the buses therefore were empty. Black people started to hike, as you can see in these pictures. Also, they were traveling barefooted to work or wherever that they were going. So by virtue, as this was a business to white people. 75% of their profit was lost due to this bus boycott. Hence, in 1956, the business people put pressure on the government to say that the government must respond with immediate effect to this issue because they are losing a lot of money. So therefore, in 1956, the court ruled to end segregation in all buses. So this means also this event was successful to a greater extent because what African Americans were fighting for, they achieved it. So now we are moving to another event, which is sit-ins. Sit-ins therefore were from 1960 to 1964. They were also spearheaded by an organization of students which was called Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So the civil rights. So before we engage this event, so now you can see therefore from our first question that was in 2018, which is saying that sit-ins were the only form of civil rights movement that was used, during the civil rights movement, that you can say no because there were two events that took place before sit-ins. In fact, sit-ins were inspired by these two events that took place during 1954 and 1955. So the Montgomery bus boycott, as I said, gained a lot of momentum in the black community. Therefore, a lot of people wanted to join in this protest for civil rights, in fighting for black people to get their rights and have a voice in America. Therefore, this influence even extended to students, as students formed an organization which was called Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. These students, therefore, in 1960, decided that they will go to restaurants that were designated for white-only people. Let me show you a picture. So, decided that they will go to restaurant that will be designated for white. That was designated for white-only people. So the strategies that were used by Martin Luther King of nonviolence, of course, it influenced, extended even to some smaller white communities, as you can see in this picture. As you can see in this picture here, that's this guy here is a white guy, of course. So this student organization was made up of black people and some white people. Therefore, they went into areas that were designated for white only, as I said. So their struggle, of course, was for public facilities, that public facilities should be open to everyone, as this act was also there in South Africa during apartheid. You will remember from our previous video. So therefore, the following day, more and more students joined in this student, and then from 1960 to 1964, sit-ins were extended to 11 states of America in the South to show their progress and to show to the extent at which they were successful and influential to all those that believed in desegregation. So, therefore, the sit-ins were a form of mobilization, of mobilizing other people in America to join forces with African American in the struggle for non-violent for civil rights of African American. So this event also was successful to a greater extent, which is very important to argue and address in the paper or in your exam. I think the reason I'm showing you the organizations that were heading these events is because I want to show you that as time progresses, the civil rights protest was gaining more momentum because different groups of different people of race, age, religion were coming in with their organization to form part because they were influenced by Martin Luther King. So our fourth event, therefore, is freedom rights. It's freedom rights. Freedom rights or freedom riders. From 1961, 1962. This one was also headed by a different organization, which is abbreviated as CORE. Of course. So, an organization called Congress for Racial Equality changed the dynamics of the civil society protest, because I think in the events that we have engaged or ulama events esike sakhuluma ngawo, you can see that these events are addressing one thing and a specific thing: the bus segregation, education, you see. So the Congress of Racial Equality came with a different strategy or influenced the civil rights now to say that their aim should be bigger. They should challenge the system as it is instead of complaining about the smaller issues. So therefore, this group was therefore called the Freedom Riders. What they did, therefore, they wanted to test. They tested all the success of the events that we have discussed in education, in buses, because although the courts or the Constitution of America after these events were in favor of African American, however, in reality, it was not the case. Therefore, in 1961, blacks and whites boarded buses, and then unfortunately they met with an angry mob of a group that was called Ku Klux Klan, which stoned the buses, even firebombed them, because they were against integration or black people in African American sharing America equally. So you can see that freedom riders came with an approach that was used during the Montgomery bus boycott, because their struggle also was for buses. So their strategy, therefore, was going to places that were designated for white, because as I said that although they previously in the events that we have discussed, they won all the court cases, court rulings and everything, but in practice it was not the case. Everything was still segregated according to the race. So public facilities, for instance, like restaurants, they were still designated for whites, separately for whites, and then others for blacks. Toilets had signs, as I showed you in our previous video, that toilets had signs that this one the whites, this one are for non-white people. So the Freedom Riders therefore went to dismantle that system, because in all the places that were segregated, they went there. In restaurants, they went there to adopt sit-in, because the Freedom Riders, if singayibeka kahle, they were influenced by sit-in, because they continued with sit-ins, but in a more militant way, although they were not engaging physically with their opponent. So their influence therefore extended to train station, airport, to an extent that the court ruling or the business people had to discuss or had to put pressure again to the government, because you have to remember even Uti, during this time, the 1960s, America was involved in many battles of a Cold War. So you must go to our previous video where we are discussing the Cold War, because during this time, America was involved with Cold War, and all these things are televised. So if they are televised, they portray America in a negative light, which is discrediting capitalism, which was their system. So these are Freedom Riders here. As I said, which they were a mixture, because the system of non-violent was extended to white community. In fact, white people were inspired by this system of non-violent. So our following event, it is the Birmingham campaign. It is the Birmingham campaign of 1963. My pen is not writing. Sorry, my system is giving me some issues, but it is giving me some issues. Pepet, usondele la. Awuyiphosa uzoyibheka la, ayisafuni ukubhala le mpahla, ngisho sengibhala ngene. Hey, ngesandla ngathi kuyaqhubeka ngesandla bro. Ngisazi ukuthi yini manje, sengiqhuba kanje. Apha ngizama ukubona, awushintsha ipeni mhlawumbe. Hawu Nkosi yami, yini kanti? Awu ungalingi uqale phansi mfo. Ukuthi yabhala yini?
ukuthi azogcinephi. Siqale phansi siqhubeka ukugcina khona. Senze ukuthi azohlanganisa.
Okay. I delete it, but I want to change it.
I'm going to delete.